Hey Rebecca, thanks for getting this in. Okay, so here are all of your finals. Great. And then your contact sheet, sorry. And then here's a final. And here's a final. And then this is a really beautiful image. Let me just start out by saying that this is a really beautiful image. And if you would have done one little technical thing, this would be fantastic. Maybe two. But what I need here for this to be complete are two things. One, your equipment shots need to be enlarged views, your equipment and light meter shots. And then two, every time you change your lighting setup, you need to take another equipment shot. Right now we only have one equipment shot. The equipment shot isn't so that I can see that you're using the proper equipment. The equipment shot is so we can see where your lights are placed, so we can talk about it. It's really important to give us enlarged views and make sure that you give us equipment shots for every time you change your lights. And we can see here that you change the light at least twice, if not more. Because we have pretty flat light here. And then we're starting to have a slightly higher ratio, a high light ratio right here. And then a little bit less here, but it's different than the first. So there's at least two lighting changes. Okay, so that being said, the other thing that I need for this to be complete is when you are labeling your contact sheets, make sure that you label them with all three exposure settings, your ISO, your shutter speed, and your aperture. And I'm not positive, but I think the only thing you're giving me right now is your aperture. It's 1/4 of a second, am I right? Is that what, no, I'm sorry, duh, your shutter speed at 1/4 of a second. And that's not terribly helpful. We need all three exposure settings. And I would be able to tell you with all three exposure settings what was going on with your light meter in the first three. I suspect what was going on, truthfully, is that either you had the Lumisphere in the wrong spot or you were holding the light meter not necessarily exactly next to your subject. You were maybe holding it a little bit in front of your subject or something, so that the light meter was reading that the light was more intense because the light meter was closer to the light, so the light was more intense based on the inverse square law, and so it would have told you, oh, you don't need that much exposure, so just go like this, and then it was too dark. I bet you that's what was happening. So back to that. So now let's talk about your quality of light. So here you've got a high ratio. This is probably like 5:1 or 5. I mean, God, I'm talking really weirdly. 1:5 or 1:8, something like that, because this is much darker than this. So that's great. It's very moody, and even this cast shadow is actually rather nice right here, and the texture of the shirt is pretty interesting too. And it's sort of nice the way he's looking off into the distance towards the light. That always makes more sense to me when people are looking towards the light rather than away from it. So that makes sense to me. And what else did I want to tell you about this shot? Well, I might have to get back to it. But you said, I think, in your description you were shooting with a black reflector? I'm not really sure what you mean there. I'm having a hard time from your equipment shot deciphering your language there. So that's another reason why we need all the equipment shots and we need them enlarged. Because I think that you were using a black reflector as a flag, maybe? I'm not sure. If I had the shot, I could tell you. And then here you have rather even light. Oh, I remember what I was going to say about this shot. This is short lighting, because the side of your subject's face that's facing the camera, that's toward the camera, is not lit. It's the away side that's lit, so we call that short lighting. And that's very nice to do, and it also gives you a slight butterfly effect because your light is above your subject. So here we have a slight butterfly effect. We have a slight butterfly shadow under there. It's hard to tell because he's got a mustache, but it's there. And then here our lighting is very flat. You said that you had in your second image, you have flat lighting. Yeah, you have exactly what you intended. It's perfect. It's very flattering. Very nice image. And so my only two things about this image that I would change is I would change the composition. I probably would have gotten closer or used a different focal length lens so that I was a lot closer, maybe, I don't know, probably like that. Because I think all of this extra space up here is a little awkward. And then I would have pulled my subject several feet away from the backdrop so that I didn't have any weird shadows cast on the backdrop, because I find this shadow right here, that shadow, distracting. Whereas this one I think is sort of compositionally interesting, though I might prefer it if it wasn't there. Of course, it's hard for me to visualize that. So it's really nice to pull our subjects several feet off of the backdrop so that we can light the backdrop independently of our model, and so that we're not casting any unwanted shadows or anything like that. It's a really, really important technique to remember. Okay, so that's it. So for further submissions, please give me all of your exposure settings on your contact sheet and give me all of your equipment shots. Every time you change your lights, take an equipment shot and give us an enlarged view. So this isn't entirely a complete submission, but it's getting there. We're getting better, right? And then also I wanted to give you a shout out on many of your compositions are very nice. Your model seems very relaxed with you. And you know, he's not changing his pose a whole lot, but it's just enough to add interest to the whole shoot. It gives you multiple options. And so if you are the one encouraging him to do that, way to go, and get back in here and give some advice to your peers on how you managed to do that. But if he did it naturally, well, then it was in no small part because you were also making him feel very comfortable. So good for you. That's a very important part of technique as well. Okay, thanks, Rebecca.